Hi, this is Kaushik Ranchod from the Ranchod Law Group. Welcome to our weekly immigration show. Today you are going to want to stay tuned because we have a very special guest, Diana Cortez Yanez. And this is going to be an amazing interview. We're going to be talking about mental health issues and an immigrant story, live, close-up, personal. And Diana has spoken at the White House. She's a multiple suicide attempt survivor, a suicide prevention advocate, and international public speaker. And she shares her story on many different platforms in order to help make changes in the health systems that exist but are broken in order to save lives. So we're really lucky to have her on the show today. You're going to want to stay tuned because this is something that affects, mental health is something that affects everybody's life. So welcome, Diana.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
What is one of the craziest things that you've ever done?
I love this question. When I read it, I thought, oh my goodness, I have so many things to say. I think probably the craziest is when I was about 40, I decided I needed a change of life. I packed up all my stuff in my car and my 2 dogs, and by myself moved all the way across the country to Texas to find a cowboy.
To find a cowboy? Can you tell me more about the cowboy?
I was horse crazy ever since I was a little girl. So I found out that I was supposed to have a cowboy. So I thought Texas was probably a good place to find one. I had good friends down there and they were actually trying to get me to go down for a long time. So I ended up doing it.
Okay. So thanks for sharing that. What did most people not know about you? Quirks, strange habits, hobbies?
You got the best questions. That was one of them, that I was horse crazy ever since I was born. My mom says one of my first toys that I bought for myself was a horse pick, an actual horse pick, not a play one, because I had that vision ever since I was a little girl that I was going to be doing something around horses. So that's something a lot of people don't know. And then another one is that my secret fantasy career is to be a stand-up comedian.
Really? Well, you are a public speaker, so I mean, there's a little bit of that there. Can you share your story with us, where you're from and what it was like growing up?
Sure. I was born in Mexico, but I was raised here in Washington, and ever since I was a baby. So I thought I was from here, and grew up in a crazy household. My family, I thought was normal. Everything that I had experienced I thought was what everybody experienced, but a little like the Munsters, and didn't realize it was different. But yeah, grew up with 5 brothers and sisters here in Washington, and it was a pretty good childhood. It was fun to be at home. I always felt a little different, but I didn't know why. I didn't understand why until later on in my life. You
said that you were born in Mexico, but you never knew that. Can you talk more about that? And I think that's common for quite a few immigrants. This is not like an abnormal thing, but it's untalked about.
Yeah, I agree. I know it was so big for us as kids because we grew up here and we didn't know anything about immigration, about laws, about crossing borders. We didn't know any of that. We understood we were from a different country, but even that wasn't really explained to us. We just knew our parents were basically from there. We grew up in a place that there wasn't very many Hispanics here in Washington because my parents decided to move as far away from Mexico as possible. And this is probably as far as right before Canada. So we ended up here in Washington.
How did they decide Washington state? Like, California, Texas, those are some
right. No, they were reaching for the stars. They said, we want way far away from Mexico. And they ended up having a friend who is from here, from Washington. So
okay. So there's a kind of a common connection as well.
Yeah. So he brought him up here and they were happy about it. The only thing I noticed when I was growing up is that everybody was blonde and blue-eyed and I wasn't. Everybody was like a little string bean, very thin, and I wasn't. I was very curvaceous ever since I was little. So those kind of things stood out with to me as a child, but never did I feel like people were prejudiced against me. I just felt I did feel different. But so I didn't understand any of that whole thing about being from a different country and how you get here, any of that. My parents didn't think it was important. And now I know why, but I didn't know why then. And so I didn't think it was important either.
And then, so you went from that experience, and then I understand you just became a citizen. So how does that feel, like going from that experience, not all of a sudden over many years, on this immigration journey to become a citizen?
Well, there was a lot of things that happened in between. And like I said, my mom, even when we were here legally, didn't think that becoming a citizen was important. And I don't really understand that. She's passed now, so I can't really ask her. But I know she didn't instill that in us. So I never became a citizen until now that I'm older. But our immigration story was really interesting. We lived here in Washington and didn't know, like I told you, about the laws or anything. My oldest brother was, I think he was about 17, maybe 15, went to visit in Canada with some friends and neighbors of ours. And on his way back, they was asked his immigration status, which he didn't even know there was one. And they found out he was here illegally and that our whole family was. So next thing we know, the immigration agents are I'm laughing, but it was kind of scary. At the front door and at the back door, it was like a movie. Knocking at night. My parents weren't home. My oldest sister was watching us, and they came in, asked us where we were born, a few questions, and then ended up leaving. Found out we were illegally here, had been since I was a baby, and by then I was about 7, and deported us. Deported us to Mexico, and we had always heard about Mexico because my parents were from there. We even knew Spanish. We could understand it, but we couldn't speak it because we ended up learning English. It's amazing what the brain can do. We spoke English, understood Spanish, but could not speak Spanish. So when we got sent back to Mexico, oh my goodness, it was like being a fish out of water. Everything was different, from the food to the people, as far as their customs and traditions, their daily lives, and the language. We did not speak the language. So when we were put in school, we actually got disciplined because by the teachers, because we looked Mexican. We understood what they were saying, but we did not know how to speak it. So they thought we were faking it. So yeah, it was quite a trauma to be down there. And we ended up being down there 3 years. Every year we'd travel as a family to the border because my parents are from Michoacan, which is a big state in central Mexico. And so we would have to travel in this dilapidated car, remember, all of us stuffed in there, all 7 of us, with very little money, and all the way up to the border to Tijuana. We'd turn in our application, we'd see an agent, they'd deny us, there we go back to Michoacan. And we did it 3 times, 2 times, and the third was the charm. We got it. So we celebrated, got back to Washington, and have been here pretty much ever since.
So that must have been so traumatic. I mean, how old were you when that happened? I mean, that is very scary for a child to experience that.
It really was.
Well, how old were you?
I was 7 when it started. And so 7, 8, 9, probably 9 when we got back, 9, 10.
So 7-year-old, and you have immigration officers coming to your home, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, you're in Mexico overnight, and your whole world flip-flopped.
Whole world was turned upside down. It was interesting. Yeah, it was really, really traumatic. What I learned mostly from it was that nothing stays the same, and you have to kind of learn to do impromptu and learn to get along with everybody. I was always a new person. We were always the new kids on the block. So unfortunately, what that happened is that I turned into quite a chameleon. In a way, it's good because I do get along with most people, but in a way, it was hard for my identity because it was hard for even me to realize who the real me was. Not the person trying to fit in, not the person trying to get what they needed. So yeah, it was pretty traumatic, to tell you the truth.
Well, I like what you said, like about nothing stays the same. And, your story is like a real intense example of how everything's always changing, and that change is the constant. And you also touched upon something about how your identity is straddling all these different worlds. And I think that's true for a lot of immigrants, is that you're born in one place, so you have that culture, but you're growing up in the United States, so you have that culture. Can you tell about like how were you able to overcome all of these different identities and make them into, you know, a story for yourself that you could that would make sense?
Thanks. Yeah, what happened is that the good thing is that our family bond, especially the siblings, was so close that that helped carry me wherever we did go. I never felt completely alone because I was, you know, had my siblings, which there was 6 of us. And so that helped. But what like I mentioned, what ended up happening is that I quickly learned how to make friends. I quickly learned how to change, to adapt to the changing circumstances. So I think that that's how I was able to get over it. Humor has always been a big part of what's helped me. I remember thinking last night when I was thinking about this interview that I wanted to tell you, this is how desperate we got in Mexico, my brother and I, for entertainment, because many times we didn't have TV or even a radio. And one of the houses we lived in was a frame of a house. It wasn't even a house, a complete built house. And so my brother and I would sit there. This literally is what kept us, you know, kind of sane, was that we'd say knock, knock, and another one would say, who's there? And then we'd say, me, who were you expecting? Superman? We would crack up for hours on jokes, and the same joke. We'd say it over and over. Of course, we'd say, who were you expecting? Batman? Who were you expecting? You know, whatever. And that's how we got through a lot of the times, because we were kids and we didn't have anything else outside. We pretty much, because our parents, you know, always tried to get us to stay inside when we were alone because they traveled somewhere else to work. And so it was things like that that kept me going.
I love that you use humor and, you know, in the dire times, like living in the frame of a house where there's, you know, I imagine a lot of poverty probably if you're living in the frame of a house, but still able to keep that positivity and spirit up. And I think that's true for a lot of immigrants, just having to overcome so much, but always finding a degree of resourcefulness to be able to do that. So you went from this, you entered, you know, you came back in legally like 10 years old, and then years later, you were asked to speak at the White House. So let's talk about that. Like what, you know, from poverty, living in the frame of a house, then going to speaking at the White House.
Can you imagine? It was surreal, because not only had I had that experience, that negative experience, harsh experience in Mexico, when I came back, I had mental health issues here, being suicidal ideation, which I didn't even know where it was coming from. I had never even heard of suicide, basically. Maybe I'd seen it in a movie, but I didn't know anybody because we didn't talk about it. Latins still are a little behind on talking about it, more so than most Americans here. But that's why I really, really try to do it and use my full name so that people who are Latin can identify that it's important to talk about. But so I had my struggles with mental health and with suicidality for many years as a teenager and then as a young adult. And for many years, I didn't have help. The system did not have, the mental health system, and even the medical system didn't really have appropriate help for me. And so I went through many years, several attempts, with any of which, of course, could have taken my life. But unfortunately, they didn't. And I'm still here to tell my story. I first, you know, started talking about it. I had my therapist recommended me to start talking about it. Things went well. And eventually, after I spoke about it for a few, I think maybe 2 years, I got this invitation from the White House, but it was hilarious. When I got the invitation in the email, I thought, oh man, spam, they're getting really good. Now I got spam from the White House, right? They're looking for me. The funniest thing is that the person who had sent me the email had a phone number. So I called them and she said, you know what, I'm going into a meeting right now. Just follow the email and I'll get back to you. And I said, oh yeah, that's what they always say in those
Sounds like
scam calls.
yeah, one of those the Nigerian scams or something.
Because they didn't even say White House call speaking or anything. She just said, follow the email and you'll do it, you know. So I still thought it was a scam. Ended up finding out it was the White House and just could not believe it. When I went to the White House, I was so in awe of everything. They have everything. They knew my name, of course, before I got there, before I got in. They were like, hi, Miss Cortez welcome to the White House. When I was eventually in the room they were going to film us in, it's that room that has a blue curtain and the White House logo in the back that you see on TV. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing here? This poor Mexican, who had, like you said, had all these traumatic experiences. I suffered from substance use disorder at one point in my life. I just never would have thought that I would have been blessed to speak at the White House, but I was. And even though I had that fear, that doubt, self-doubt, and it ended up being a beautiful, beautiful experience. And when I came off the stage, still having a lot of that doubt, there was a gentleman, and I still don't know who he was. I think he was an angel who was there. And because I was on a panel, and the other lived experience people that were on there had all these accolades. Some of them had written books, some of them were psychologists themselves now. And I just had my story. But when I came down, he said, Diana, I just want to tell you, you were the heart of everybody up there. You really humanized the whole experience. And so I remembered from that moment on, and I still do when I have my doubts, that I'm here to tell my story and my heartfelt story to help others.
So that's just amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So there must be something that you did that made the White House want to call you up. Is there anything that you can point to, or?
Yes, actually the suicide prevention community, even though it's national, is really pretty tight. A lot of us know each other and work together, so it's just word of mouth. Somebody heard something in my story that they thought it was that important, so I was actually recommended to the White House to speak by one of the organizations that I work with still to this day. It's called Zero Suicide, and it's a organization that promotes suicide prevention and talks about the system, the health system, and how we have to change it. And so I speak for them a lot because that's what my story does, is it talks about how I wasn't helped for a long time, then how eventually I was helped, and how what we can do to help change the system now to help others.
Was it more difficult going through this, being Latina? You mentioned that it's not really talked about. I know that's true, for a lot of other cultures, including the South Asian culture. These types of things are really frowned upon and not talked about and stigmatized in a way. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm still opening barriers to this day. I'm kind of a pioneer. And that's why like I said, I use my full name when I do speak. A lot of people, especially Hispanics, will say, aren't you embarrassed to go up there and tell, your story about alcoholism and suicide attempts and, any mental health issues that you feel, medication? But no, actually, at first I was, because I think that in our culture, I can only speak for the Latin culture because that's the one I'm from. In our culture, you don't speak about mental illness. Mental illness is a personality defect. It's not a health thing to a lot of Latins. And so they don't speak about mental health because that brings shame to the family. But then we come to a new country that is supposed to be the, golden dream, American dream. And so then they really don't want to bring out any kind of problems that they have. Because that's how they were brought up. And then coming into a new country, they don't want people to have anything else to have prejudice about. And so for them, mental health, suicide for sure is not spoken about. So that's why it's so important for me to do it, because I want to break that stigma. I want to break the feelings that we can't talk about things that hurt us, just like we would talk about having cancer or diabetes. We don't go around going, oh God, that person has diabetes, let's not talk about it. It brings shame to the family. No, we talk about it more, even because we want to know that if somebody has something that we can help with, we want them to know about the resources out there. So that's why I do what I do.
If there's one thing that you could say to people who are going through what you've gone through in the past, what would you want to say? Or people from your community?
I want to say to hang on and to talk about it. Talking about it is so important. As Latins, we love to talk, or at least that's what I like to think, because I love to. But so we need to talk about it. Even if we don't know what it is that the solutions are, there is not a solution, but there are resources. There is help for you. So if you have these feelings yourself, or somebody who does, just realize that there is help, and it will help us all if we talk about it. If you don't know the resources, try to go to somebody who does, or just ask for help. And if you don't receive the help from the places you think you should, like clinic first, or maybe a hospital, keep looking, because there is help for those who need it.
If there's someone that's suffering through this, where's the first place that you would recommend they could go, or what are some options for them?
I think the first place is always family or friends, because it's something so personal and so embarrassing, because not because it is embarrassing or should be, but because that's how we've been brought up. So if you have to you don't feel comfortable to go to a teacher, a counselor, a professional, then your family. But just let them know that, you need to look for help because you're feeling this way. And if they can be there with you, besides you, help you. Maybe you don't, because of my depression, I also felt I didn't have the energy to look. And so maybe they can do the looking for you. I'd say you can go online to look for a mental health therapist, tell them that you're suicidal or having these ideas. And then talk openly about it as much as you can, because there is help, but you need to be able to share that and to look for the information, because a lot of things out there aren't helpful.
How did you personally overcome the challenges that you undergone, through all of these, like you talked about depression, overcoming the suicides? You've overcome a lot. Were there any tools you want to share? Or
yes, there are a lot. Through the years, I was in therapy for about 30 years. I'm not going to tell you how old I am. I'm only like 31, but and so I went through a lot, but that's why I say be consistent, stay with it, because a lot of the things that I experienced weren't helpful. But the things that were helpful have me here today. Like this, there's what they call evidence-based therapy. The one I took was DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. I don't know how to spell it, but I know how to say it at least now. And that's a therapy that's specifically for people who have suicidal crisis. And so look for what there is. I had that therapy, that specific therapy. I learned that you need to have a support system, not just yourself, not just your friends, not just your family. Because if you lean on one person or a couple of people, they're not going to be able to help you during your whole life, during so many different crises. Because I said I had several attempts. But if you can build it to where you have some professionals, some friends, your family, whoever you can have to be your support circle. I depend a lot on 12-step programs. I believe in them. They have saved me, given me a new life in many, many ways. And so when you have that set up, when you do, because guess what? Even though I am not feeling suicidal at the moment, those feelings can come back. And so you have to have everything set up so that you can help prevent a crisis from getting down to that point again. And that's really what it ends up being about afterwards when you're in recovery, is to just keep yourself in a good level. And so when you see yourself going down a certain path, you have a strategy as to how to stop it and to help yourself by reaching out to others.
Awesome. So you said there's so many nuggets there. Have a support system, have the different therapies that you chose, 12 steps. Can you tell me about 12 steps? Like why was that, or why is that successful for you? And can you explain what 12 steps are? So not everyone listening might be not knowing what that is.
Okay, well, 12 steps are programs, and I just recently found out, because I shared it on my sobriety birthday, that it's not good to say which programs those are specifically, but I guess a lot of people know about AA. That's one of them. And these programs, what they found out long time ago, about 50 years ago, is that guess what? The person that can help us most is somebody who has gone through the same thing that we have gone through. And that's what I'm using too now in my career as a speaker. I share my story, and those people who can identify with it, whether that be for themselves, for a loved one, for a neighbor, for a coworker, are able to get help because of that. So that 12-step system has helped me so much. It helped me in learning that I wasn't alone. Also that I needed help, that I didn't have to do this by myself. I had others, thousands of others who've gone through what I did and have been successful at overcoming it. And so that's why I believe so much in the 12-step programs. And they have one for everything.
And so you talked about like just hearing other people's stories. I think there's community in it as well. How would someone find out about a 12-step program if they think they need support or help? Where would they go to learn more about 12 steps?
You could probably just ask anybody, or if you know anybody who has been in any of those programs. But also, if you don't, or you don't want to ask somebody, you could look it up on the internet. Not the internet. Google is my best friend now because he answers everything, or they answer everything. But yeah, you can look at organizations, especially the basic one that started it all, is everywhere, and they have meetings everywhere at all times, every single day. So it's very, very accessible. And guess what? They even have them in Spanish.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
if
great.
somebody needs it in Spanish, they can go to a Spanish one here in the US. I actually went to one in Mexico too.
So it's worldwide too. That's awesome. So you had this attempted suicide, and then you became a speaker. Like, how did you go from being at the lows of the low then to becoming a speaker? I mean, that to me takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength.
Thanks. Well, it didn't start out that way. I didn't start out so much courage and so much strength. It's funny. I tell this story, I tell everybody, did you guys know that I started this because I wanted $100 gift certificate? That's what I was offered the very first time to be in a focus group. And I went for it. My therapist, I was coming to the end of my therapy and successful for suicide prevention so that I wasn't suicidal anymore. And she got requests from a friend of hers who was a therapist. She's now my mentor, who needed a person to help her with a project for Facebook. She was Facebook has this, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Facebook has a project still going on where if you write something on there, a comment, and somebody worries about it, they can actually tag it or flag it, and then Facebook will look into it. Sometimes they'll send a professional. They have different ways of looking into it. So this new therapist, my mentor, her name is Ursula, she was helping them come up with this program. And so she wanted somebody who had been suicidal but wasn't suicidal anymore to go through it and see how they felt about it. Like if it really would help them. And if not, what would they suggest that would be more helpful? So I went into it, like I said, for my $100 gift certificate. But what I found out when I was there is that it was amazing to be able to, those had been the darkest times I'd ever had. And I thought I'd never want to think about them again or bring them up for sure in public. But what I found is that when I was able to go back to those times and think of helpful things that I could say now that could help somebody, and in this case, help Facebook come up with the best program, it was like super validating and something I wanted to do. So it started from there. We went from there. She said, how do you think you'll do on film? And I said, well, we'll find out. And since then, here I am.
There was the launching of your career. So it started off with one small step. It wasn't like you had instantaneous success. And then it seems like it built after that. So after that happened, what was the next step after that?
The next step from that is when we did go to filming, I started speaking around the nation. I started getting requests for speaking around the nation with this organization I told you, Zero Suicide. I remember they sent me to Maine, and I had never been on the East Coast. And I thought I didn't know they were going to pay me. So I was like, yes, I'd love to speak in Maine. Okay, thanks. Goodbye to the person who was requesting it. And then I thought, wait a minute. I don't have money to go to Maine. I don't have money for the airplane, for the hotel and everything. And so I felt really bad, but I had to call back. So I called back and I said, I was really excited. Thank you for asking, but actually I can't afford it. And they're like, oh, we forgot to tell you, all expenses paid, and we're going to pay you $3,000. I almost died that very minute. I was like, what? I'm going to be paid to speak? Usually people would tell me to be quiet because I talked too much ever since I was a little girl.
Now you get paid for it. The way things like just flowed in your career just seems like this is something that is meant to be for you. It's, that you're sharing, getting your message out, and, it's making such an impact. The White House invites you, like, for I think for a lot of people, that would be like the pinnacle of success. And for you, although it didn't come just, right away, it seems like it just flowed so easily for you.
Yeah, that's exactly how all of it has been. I can't tell you how blessed I have been. The whole White House, I was also interviewed for NPR. I'd heard of NPR all the time. I hadn't heard this actual speaker, which I guess she's really famous, Diane Ream. But yeah, they reached out to me. I mean, just everything has gone so organically, and it's something I've always wanted to do. It's not tell my story, but help people. I'm a middle child, so I'm kind of the peacemaker, and I've always wanted to help people. And I never knew that telling my story, the darkest, hardest things about me, could actually help people stay alive, which to me is, of course, the ultimate help. And so that's why I think it's so important for people to share what they think is dark, what they think is shameful, possibly, because they never know where it can go and who it can help.
Well, thank you so much, Diana, for joining our show. And how do people connect with you if they want to learn, if they want you to speak or they just have questions?
Yeah, we can chit chat, as you can tell. I do have a website. It's Diana C. Speaks, the C for Cortez, speaks with an S at the end, .com. And my email is dccortes@yahoo.com. They can reach out to me there. And if they look me up, Diana Cortez Yanez in Google, I think I come up. Isn't that weird? So yeah, I would be happy for anybody to reach out, even if they just have questions, or even if they just want to talk about suicide prevention. Remember, talking about it is the most important.
Okay, great. And we'll put Diana's website in the description. And if anyone has questions, you can put questions in the comment section below, and we invite you to do that. And if you stayed till the end, you got to make sure you smash that like button, and make sure you give us feedback. Do you want to see more of these videos? Was this interesting to you? Because it helps us tell you, or it helps us decide what you want on the channel, what kind of topics. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Diana, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Welcome. Adios.